Hi, it's great to be with you again. In the last video we talked some about perforations and roulettes. It's good to know about those things. It is indeed. Tonight, today, wherever you happen to be, this morning, whatever part of the world you're watching from, let's talk some about printing. There are three major types of printing. Three major methods of printing have been used to produce postage stamps for many years. And the three major methods of printing used to produce postage stamps are, first, engraving, which is done either by a rotary press or a flat plate press. Secondly, typography or typographing, which includes offset printing, which we'll talk about later. And then thirdly, lithography or lithographing. So the three major methods of printing used to produce postage stamps are engraving, first, second, typography or typographing, and then third, lithography or lithographing. Engraved stamps feel rough to the touch because the ink is deposited in raised lines. Typographed stamps are rather smooth to the touch and sometimes show depressions on the reverse side of the stamp because the ink is pressed on from the type. And then lithographed stamps are perfectly flat in appearance and feel and inclined to have a bit of a smear kind of look to them in some cases. So there we have engraved, typographed, and lithographed stamps. In engraving, the stamps are produced from engraved plates, which differ from typography and lithography in that the lines which are used for printing are cut into the plate. There's even recutting, which involves several different steps involving a die and a plate and a transfer roll, which we can talk about later. You have double transfers with engraving, where you have stamps that show evidence of a second transfer from a roll to a plate, which is superimposed over the first impression. It's sometimes called a shift or a re-entry. You have cracked plates, and stamps that show evidence of that can sell for a premium. Stamps which show evidences that the plate from which they're printed has been cracked can be quite valuable. Plates crack from various causes, the commonest of which is too quick an immersion in a cooling bath when tempering, so the cold water can cause it to crack. Rotary press type printing, or the stamps are produced from engraved plates that have been curved around a cylinder of a rotary press. So the plates are curved around a cylinder, and such stamps are usually longer or wider than the same stamps that are printed from flat plates, depending on the way the plate was stretched to fit the cylinder. In a flat plate press, engraved stamps are printed from flat plates as opposed to those printed from a curved or rotary plane. There are a few differences. So you can find recut stamps, double transfers, cracked plates, a rotary press, and a flat plate stamps are common methods that you find in engraved stamps. Let's talk about typography a little bit. Typographed stamps. Typographed stamps are stamps that are printed from typographed plates. These differ from engraved plates in that the lines which print the designs are raised above the surface of the plate, similar to ordinary type printing. There's a form known as cliche in typographed stamps. A cliche is more or less a single unit of type bearing the design of the stamp. One of the earliest methods of producing stamps was a series of blocks, each bearing one design that locked up in a frame from which a sheet of stamps would be printed. And the individual blocks were known as cliches. Also have in typographed stamps wood blocks. Woodblock stamps are stamps which have been printed from designs carved on wood. A notable example are the early Cape of Good Hope stamps that were woodblock stamps. In lithography or lithographed stamps, lithographed stamps are stamps which are produced from lithostones or from modern lithographic plates, where ink is more or less smeared on the stone and then an impression is made. A form of that is what is known as a double impression. More or less stamps that have been printed twice, one impression on top of the other. You shouldn't confuse that with a double transfer, which applies to a design engraved into the plate twice. And we then also, with lithography, you'll find stamps that are printed on both sides. Stamps from a sheet through which, for some reason or other, has been turned over and passed through the press a second time, which shows a positive impression on both sides of the paper. It shouldn't be confused with offset, which is a stamp which shows a negative impression on the reverse. Offset stamps will show a negative impression on the other side. This occurs from stacking together sheets of stamps while the ink is still not quite dry, so you'll see the negative impression on the back side. The impression is more or less going to be transferred from the bottom to the upper sheet, and these impressions are always in reverse, or rather reading backwards, so to speak. An offset printing is a rapid method of printing whereby the plate from which the stamps are produced transfers its impression to a rubber roller. It's a sheet of paper receiving its impression from this roller and not directly from the plate. The inverted Jenny is another form of lithography, where you have an inverted center, a stamp in which the center has been printed in inverted position in relation to the frame. And that occurs on bicolored stamps when the sheet, through error, is placed in the press the wrong way when it receives the second color. So the Jenny is, or the C3A is an example of that. Embossing also is something else we see. It's a method of printing which races the paper into the design as on an ordinary envelope stamp, or an embossed envelope. Then we have proofs also. Proofs are special impressions from a plate of stamps, or plates of stamps which are submitted for the approval by authorities before the plate is actually placed into production. Proofs are taken from the die as well as from the plate and are printed on specially prepared paper, on cardboard, that type of material, in order to show up to the best advantage of the detail of the design. Well, they can really focus on and see all the intricacies in the design. We also have essays. Essays are a proof of a trial design, kind of a mock-up of the design for which a die has been made, but which has actually not been accepted yet for use as a postage stamp. You have trial colors also. These are stamps of an accepted design which are printed in colors different from those regularly used. Trial colors are not postage stamps, but are color proofs submitted for the authorities to see so that they can determine which color they prefer. You have Tata-base stamps. Tata-base stamps are pairs of stamps of one which is inverted in relationship to the other stamp. And then there are say-tenants. Say-tenant is a term used to describe two stamps that have not been separated, one of which has a variation of a design, either through error or on purpose to create, like the Soyuz stamps that were printed for space exploration some years ago. Those are say-tenants. Hand-stamped are stamps made from single designs by hand, like postmarks, so to speak. Then you have plate numbers, of course. A plate number is the number which appears in the margin at the sides or at the top and bottom of the sheet of stamps. It denotes the number of the plate used to produce the sheet. You also have plate numbers that are worked into the border design of each individual stamp, like the stamps of Great Britain in the series of 1864, where the plate numbers are very faintly embedded into the design of the of the penny reds. You have what is known as a colored network, which is similar to moire. It's a network printed over the face of a stamp as a protection against counterfeiting. Moire, which also is known as burrell or brulage, is a fine network which is printed over the face or reverse of stamps as a protection against counterfeiting also. You'll find secret marks on stamps. These are marks which were applied by the Continental Banknote Company many years ago. The stamps of 1873 is an example. Plates were made and secret marks were incorporated into these stamps in order to distinguish their printings from those of the National Banknote Company. So there are a lot of things to know about types of printing. You have once again you have engraved stamps, you have typographed stamps, lithographed stamps. You have stamps printed on both sides, double impressions, offset printing, inverted centers, embossed. You have proofs of several varieties. You have essays, trial colors, database, satenants, hand stamped issues, and a couple of different varieties of plate numbers, colored networks similar to the moire to prevent counterfeiting, burlé, brulage, or moire, which also was used as a protection against counterfeiting, and then of course secret marks used by the Continental Banknote Company to distinguish their printings from the National Banknote Company in 1873. So there are a few things to know about the three types of printing that we have, which include 1, engraving, 2, typographing, 3, lithographing. Hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you like, and let me hear from you. Thanks again. I hope you're going to have a terrific day ahead, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.